Thank you and welcome to this press briefing. The press briefing will be presented by, I'm Esther Aza Tanku. I'm the head of information within the Directorate of Information and Communication in the African Union. It's my pleasure to inform you that the chairperson of the African Commission for Human and People's Rights is going to be addressing the journalists, and his name is Honorable Solomon Ayele Delso. He will be addressing the journalists to inform and update the media and on the general public on the issues considered during the public session of the 66th ordinary session of the African Commission for Human and People's Rights, and the correct state of, the current state of human rights in Africa in general, in the context of the COVID-19 pandemics. It is now my honor to introduce and present the chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights to do his briefing, and he might be willing to also present the collaborators who are with him on the panel, just for the interest of the journalists to understand who is with him to address all the issues. And later on, after the briefing, we will take questions from the journalists and give them the answers. Thank you. Over to you, Excellency and Honorable.
Thank you very much, Madam Esther. I would first of all like to welcome the distinguished members of the press for this press briefing on the ordinary session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. As the moderator, Madam Esther, indicated, I'm joined here by the Acting Secretary of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Ms. Lindiwe Khumalo. I will be presenting the briefing for this agenda. I would like to start off by indicating that the African Commission on Human and People's Rights is the premier human rights body of the African Union. It is a treaty-based human rights body established on the basis of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which is the founding human rights treaty of the African human rights system, adopted in 1981. And the African Commission has been in operation since 1987. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights under the African Charter is provided with a mandate for the promotion and protection of human and people's rights. This mandate requires that the Commission monitors the state of human rights on the continent and undertakes various activities in order to address various human rights issues on the African continent through various means and mechanisms. The Commission is made up of 11 members who are elected by the highest authority of the African Union, the heads of state and government, in accordance with the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. These 11 members are legal minds, among the best legal minds of the continent, who serve in their personal capacity. And the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, being an expert body, it operates as an autonomous and independent body dealing with human rights issues. We operate on the basis of country rapporteurship. All the 11 members have responsibilities for different countries, and therefore country situations are specifically monitored and responded to through various means, through the country rapporteurs, including through direct engagement with the state authorities by issuing a statement, by issuing urgent letters of appeal to the highest authorities of the states concerned, and also through the adoption of resolutions, through undertaking promotion missions in the country, on the ground, with a view to have first-hand understanding of the state of affairs, but also to promote and popularize the human and people's rights enshrined in the African Charter. There are various thematic issues that the Commission also follows through its special mechanisms. One of the vehicles or the mediums through which the Commission undertakes its activities and discharges its mandate is through the convening of its sessions. So the latest session that we have just concluded today is the 66th ordinary session of the Commission. Unlike other previous sessions of the Commission, which are convened in person and physically, this 66th ordinary session, as you all understand, for understandable reasons, is convened virtually. It is the first virtual session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. I would like to indicate in that respect that a number of, in this session, which has a public segment as well as a closed segment, we reviewed the state of human rights on the African continent because of the serious challenge that COVID-19 poses to human and people's rights, and the further danger and risk that the COVID-19 response measures, as well as the socioeconomic fallouts from COVID, pose to the enjoyment of human and people's rights on the continent. This session has paid particular attention to human and people's rights in the context of COVID-19. In this respect, one of the points that I wish to indicate as far as the session is concerned is that a total of 335 delegates attended this 66th ordinary session of the Commission, representing 88 representing state parties from 17 member states of the African Union, 3 institutions of the African Union, 38 representing national human rights institutions. These are constitutionally established commissions of human rights, 1 international organization, intergovernmental organization, this is the ICRC, 189 representing African and international non-governmental organizations which have observer status with the Commission. In the course of the public segment, 9 states, parties to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, delivered statements providing updates on the state of human rights in those countries. 6 commissions of human rights also provided an update on the state of human rights from a number of countries, including Sahrawi, Rwanda, Algeria, Cameroon, Kenya, and Nigeria. A total of 29 non-governmental organizations with observer status with the Commission also delivered statement providing updates on the state of human rights on the continent in a specific countries or in respect of specific thematic issues. It could be on the rights of women or on refugees. One international organization, intergovernmental organization, international organization also made a statement. I wish to also bring to your attention that in the course of the public segment of the session, the Commission also reviewed applications for observer status with the African Commission by non-governmental organizations, and it gave observer status to two non-governmental organizations, bringing the total number of non-governmental organizations and civic organizations with observer status with the African Commission to 525. The Commission also, within the framework of the African Charter, reviewed state report. The state report that the Commission reviewed during this session, the 66th ordinary session, was the report, the combined report of the 9th and 10th periodic report of the Republic of Mauritius. That was and it was presented by the Foreign Minister of Mauritius with his delegations. I'd also wish to indicate that the Commission, during the course of this public segment, its 11 members delivered their activity reports in terms of the various activities that they have undertaken in the promotion and protection roles that they have as country rapporteurs, as well as special mechanism holders for various themes ranging from freedom of expression and access to information to economic, social, and cultural rights. We also, in the private closed session, the Commission also considered 15 communications. These are complaints on allegations of human rights, which the Commission, through its quasi-judicial role and mandate in the protection of human rights, examined, and it has finalized 2 of these communications, finding violations in respect of those communications. I wish to now come to what the Commission has found by way of the various statements that it has received from states parties to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and also from national human rights commissions as well as civil society organizations. First, from a human rights perspective, the pandemic constitutes a threat to the rights to health and the right to life, and states are under obligation pursuant to Article 1 of the African Charter to take measures to protect the public from threats that endanger health and life. Despite variations in approach and effectiveness of responses, it has emerged from the deliberations of this 66th ordinary session that overwhelming majority of African states took the threat the pandemic has posed seriously, and they adopted measures to contain it. However imperfect, but generally based on the public health advice available at the time. Second, few countries have been successful in avoiding mortality from the pandemic, and a few have succeeded in avoiding community transmission, while some others have managed to meet the speed of the spread of the virus. And we wish to commend these countries for the efforts that they have put. Again, there are a few countries that haven't followed the scientific advice that have been reported in our statement, in the statements that we have received, which we have continued to urge those states in order for them to uphold their obligations under the African Charter. From the statements, third, received from states, NHRIs and CSOs, various exemplary approaches have been observed, including in terms of provision of regular update and information to the public on the pandemic and precautionary measures, in installing sanitation stalls in the places, in the production and distribution of protection equipments and sanitizers, in adopting socioeconomic relief measures to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 response measures, in expanding access to water and sanitation in various countries, including South Africa, Tanzania, Gabon, among others. Other countries also who reported during this period include Egypt, Eritrea, among others. While not unique to Africa, the pandemic highlighted the ill-preparedness of the health and governance systems of states. to the African Charter. This is the fourth observation. Most African states lack a pandemic response and management strategy and plan. It appears thereby they were forced to resort to ad hoc approach with a great deal of experimentation and improvisation, often leading to a state-centric approach, and in many cases lacking the benefit of public participation and community engagement. Although in this respect, exceptions of limited consultations were also observed, such as in South Africa, for example. The statements received also indicate various, while these are generally positive areas, we have also observed areas of concern, as highlighted by the various statements issued, presented during the course of the session. First, it's important to note that as far as the right to health is concerned, it has become clear that the health system of many countries on the continent have been ill-prepared and ill-equipped for responding to the pandemic, but also most importantly, when COVID-19 response measures were introduced, then other health services that these health centers could have provided have also been affected. So the right to health have been affected not only in terms of the threat that the pandemic poses, but also in terms of the disruption that the pandemic response measures have caused in terms of access to health services, and with very serious consequences in some instances, as pregnant women not being provided with assistance, losing their babies or losing their lives, have highlighted. And indeed, this is an area that have become clear and recognized by member states as well as the African Union, something that requires a heightened level of engagement and investment moving forward. Various countries in their presentation also acknowledge the need for and the work that they have started in investing in access to health services. And indeed, it has become clear that the right to health and access to health services is a fundamental human right. As a fundamental human right, it is a public good that should be made available for all, in the interest of not only fulfilling the right to health, but also in the interest of safeguarding public health across the board in all our societies. And this requires a very serious investment, including, for example, fulfilling without any further delay the promise of the Abuja Declaration, in which states parties to the African Charter promised to allocate 15% of their budget to the provision of healthcare and health services. And this is an area that requires very urgent action and intervention in order to ensure that next time the continent is well prepared and equipped. And of course, this also relates to not only as far as basic health services is concerned, but also in other areas, as this pandemic demonstrated in terms of access to therapeutics, diagnostic tests, as well as eventually vaccine. It is an area in respect of which the continent also is found weak and wanting, an area that requires a very serious policy attention and prioritization, not only in response to COVID-19, but also importantly, as we plan a post-COVID-19 social and economic order in which the health, security, and access to strategic medical supplies is guaranteed within the continent itself. That is the first area in terms of area of concern. The second area of concern, broadly speaking, that we have seen relates to how this pandemic had highlighted and laid bare the vastness of the socioeconomic and other forms of vulnerabilities of large segment of people on the African continent. And these socioeconomic deprivations and inequalities of various forms have been accentuated in the course of this pandemic when various pandemic response measures have been adopted, thereby aggravating and accentuating inequalities and vulnerabilities for various sectors of societies, with devastating consequences for the most vulnerable among our societies. And this obviously has been manifested in terms of, for example, lack of access to water, sanitation, access to public health information, lack of access to housing and shelter. In these or decent housing, many of the people living in overcrowded spaces, in highly spaces with very little or no sanitation and water, have basically no option of complying with some of the most basic requirements for protecting themselves from the virus, such as hand washing, such as sanitizing, such as social distancing. There's no space to social distance. The same thing with respect to people in IDPs, people in prison conditions as well. So this is another area. Obviously, this raises questions as to the kind of policy prioritization as far as investment in social services, in public services is concerned, as far as investment and prioritization of socioeconomic rights, access to socioeconomic rights is concerned. And indeed, it gives rise to questions as to whether or not the policy measures and the development paradigm that have been pursued, which prioritizes GDP growth rather than human-centered development, is the right approach to take. It is these vulnerabilities that have made the impact of COVID-19 much more devastating than it could have been. Without these gaps, the impact could have been limited. So this is another area that requires a very serious attention to our mind. I would like to indicate that from the statements that we have received, both from states parties, but also from others, another third area of concern relates to the unprecedented level of violations of the rights of women and girls. I think this has led to what some call a pandemic within a pandemic. We have seen an unprecedented level of sexual and gender-based violence, domestic violence, disruption of access to sexual and healthcare, reproductive health care services, including prenatal and postnatal care for pregnant women. All of these, in some cases, leading to a widespread emergence of emergency in these conditions. Some countries like, for example, in Nigeria, the National Human Rights Institution, as well as 36 states declaring an emergency as a result of this situation. And we have seen in some cases have received girls who are supposed to be in school ending up falling pregnant. Some over 4,000 girls in one county in Kenya, for example. The same thing, large number in another, in a province in Malawi, reported to us, for example. These are some of the most concerning issues. I think it is a manifestation that gender oppression is a very pervasive state of condition across the continent. I think there is an urgent need for states parties to the African Charter and the African Union to declare an emergency as far as addressing this pandemic of gender-based violations is concerned. The fourth area that we have observed in respect of which we received statements related to how the COVID-19 response measures have been enforced, some of the nature of the COVID-19 response measures and their impact. So, for example, closure of borders have been used by states. Understandably, it is one of the measures that needed to be adopted. But the totalization of the closure of borders have led to, in certain instances, undermining observance of refugee laws that require that states adopt safe access to people who are fleeing conditions of violence and conflict, as have happened in the borders from South Sudan or in the borders from DRC into neighboring. Similarly, we have observed, as far as enforcement of COVID-19 response measures are concerned, concerning trends whereby states have adopted a security-heavy enforcement approach, which leads to very serious consequences, particularly in terms of the right to life, the freedom from torture and human treatment, the right to be free from arbitrary detention and arbitrary arrest, and the right to dignity. We have seen various instances in which security institutions resorted to excessive use of force in enforcing COVID-19 response measures. In some instances, as reported, for example, by the Nigeria Human Rights Commission, leading to more days from excessive use of force than from COVID-19 during the first few weeks of the pandemic in March. These are extremely concerning situations. We have seen these events. For example, we have also received in the same way report from the Kenya National Human Rights Institution as well, where in the period between 17 March to 6 June 2020, 10 cases of loss of life and 87 varied cases of inhuman and degrading treatment by law enforcement officers. These are events in respect of which we received report from various countries, including Angola, Gabon, South Africa, Uganda, among others, showing that there are serious gaps in the state of the security sector. These gaps relate importantly in terms in the laws, doctrines, and training of security institutions vis-a-vis their role in the management of pandemics and exercising pandemic response measures. The experience has led to extremely regrettable situations, as indicated earlier on, but it also presents an opportunity for reviewing and filling in these gaps by engaging in security sector reform that ensures that the role of the security sector in managing pandemic is basically to enable members of society to comply with the pandemic containment measures. It is to facilitate community engagement for the observance of these measures. It is to provide necessary provisions for those without provisions. It is actually to use humanitarian principles rather than security principles as far as pandemics are concerned. So there is a need for engaging in this. At the Commission, from the statements that we have received, it has also become clear that the misuse and abuse of COVID-19 response measures, if it is not going to be contained and totally avoided, would lead to a very serious situation of it descending into a major human rights crisis on its own, including in terms of eroding and undermining democratic systems of governance, including freedom of the press, as well as various instances of serious governance deficits that we have witnessed in terms of the management of COVID-19, such as through the corrupt practices that have been reported in the course of this session by various actors in misusing COVID-19 related resources by certain actors within the state system. Finally, I think one area that I wish to note relates to the point that has been highlighted and recognized by states and the international community, and this relates to the socioeconomic fallout of COVID-19 and COVID-19 measures. The socioeconomic fallout can have very severe, devastating consequences for human rights on the continent, as tens of millions of people on the continent are pushed to extreme poverty, people forced as a result of the disruption of their livelihoods, with no their income, with loss of income, loss of access to engagement in economic activities, households basically facing a grim situation of starvation as well. And this socioeconomic fallout, to our mind, can have very serious catastrophic consequences on human and on the enjoyment of human and people's rights. And it is one of the reasons why there is a need for changing course in terms of public policy relating to social policy as well as economic policy, and in terms of the governance system for social and economic policy as well. We are at a time where we are required to really bring the development of people front and center, based on respect of human and people's rights. That is the only way that the response to COVID-19 can become successful, achieve public legitimacy, and also that is the basis on which the post-COVID-19 social and economic order can successfully be built on the basis of addressing the major human rights challenge of the moment, namely pervasive poverty, inequalities in all their dimensions, gender oppression and sexism, as well as the serious democratic governance deficits that we have witnessed in the course of this pandemic. I thank you very much for your attention, and should you have any question, happy to respond to those questions. Thank you, Madam Esther. Your mic is off, Madam Esther.
Okay. I was just saying we want to thank Honorable Solomon Ayele Derso. And for the interest of those who are just coming in, Honorable Solomon Ayele Derso is the chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And he was briefing the public and the audience, and as well as the journalists today, on the outcome of the 66th ordinary session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And he has given us a lot of elaborate, enlightening information there. And we want to thank him for that. We also want to take the questions that have been channeled to his attention to see, to get some of the answers. And mostly because of, we are talking about a context that is very particular, the COVID-19 current situation and human rights in this context. And the first journalist who sent this question is Mr. William Ayo from Kenya. He is the correspondent of Associate. The question is, what are you doing, Honorable, to help free jailed, to help to free journalists, jail journalists in Africa, and generally improve press freedom in the continent? We'll first get the answer to that question and go to the next question. Over to you, Honorable.
Thank you very much, Madam Esther. The COVID-19 pandemic has underscored one very important point, and this point relates to the fact that freedom of expression and access to information is key for securing health. The extent to which and how these access to information is made available can be decisive between being caught by COVID and being saved from being caught by COVID. So the work of journalists and the media is one of the essential services in the context of this pandemic. So as far as the Commission's work in this respect is concerned, the Commission engages when it receives reports with respect to specific cases of violation against journalists and the media. The Commission responds through various means, including by issuing a statement expressing its concern where it is in receipt of factual evidence. It expresses its condemnation and requests for corrective measures to be taken, including by avoiding any act against journalists, but also by investigating those cases where journalists have been violated. So this is the approach that the Commission takes. Of course, the Commission also engages in supporting and strengthening national media space through, among others, extending support to states in order to ensure that their media laws are in conformity with the standards of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights.
Second question is from journalist Mohamed Lechi Ahmed Salem, Agence Mauritanienne d'Information. The question is in French and I'm going to read it. It says, est-ce qu'il y a un plan régional destiné à chaque région et qui prend en charge la nature et les spécialités locales quant aux questions relatives aux droits humains? That's the number one question. Number two question from the same journalist is, quelle évaluation faites-vous des droits humains en Afrique? Number three question from the same journalist says, quelle est les contributions ou la contribution des ONG, c'est-à-dire les organisations des ONG et organisations internationales dans ce sens, c'est-à-dire dans le sens de du droit de l'homme? Those are the three questions that were posed in French by the journalist from Mauritania.
Thank you once again, Mohammed from Mauritania, for your question. As far as regional approach or plan of the Commission is concerned, at the beginning of my briefing, as I indicated, the 11 members of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights are assigned responsibilities for, among themselves, for all the 54 countries that are parties to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. So each of the state parties have a country rapporteur responsible for following up the situation of human rights in that country. For example, as far as Mauritania is concerned, I do understand a specific commissioner who follows up the situation in Mauritania. I'm happy to share the name of the state country rapporteur. You can also find it in the final communique of this session in the attachment, highlighting which who is responsible for what. So that is the approach that we take as far as regional approach and country approach is concerned. In some instances, of course, when regional situations require it, particular attention is given to regions, but through, mostly through thematic approach, such as, for example, if there is going to be a focus relating to issues affecting economic and social cultural rights, it is the working group on economic, social, and cultural rights of the Commission that deals with that specific region in respect of economic, social, and cultural rights. If it is conflict, for example, it is through the focal person of the Commission on human rights in conflict situations that those aspects are dealt with other mechanisms such as the special rapporteur on refugees, asylum seekers, IDPs, and migrants. With respect to the second question, as far as the human rights situation in Africa is concerned, as I have indicated in my briefing, there are a number of positive developments that, in respect of which we have received update from both states, parties to the African Charter, but also from, for example, civil society organizations. This can be in terms of, for example, the adoption of anti-FGM legislation in Sudan, which is a very welcome development, or in terms of the adoption of COVID-specific human rights policy in Angola, or it can be, for example, the adoption of a social protection policy in Rwanda. These are some of the positive things in respect of which we received update in the course of the session. As I indicated earlier on as well, there are a number of issues of concern as far as human rights are concerned on the African continent. Some showing and highlighting that there is a regression happening as far as the enjoyment of human and people's rights are concerned. It is therefore more on the side of concern from our side, the African Commission, particularly accentuated by the various human rights issues arising from COVID-19 and COVID-19 response measures, and the impact that COVID-19 and COVID-19 measures would have moving forward, as well as the socioeconomic consequences of COVID-19 becomes clearer and clearer, with jobs being lost, economies of the continent being contracted, governance deficit being accentuated. All of these are very serious areas of concern as far as the state of human rights are concerned. But one thing that is encouraging for us at the African Commission is that more and more people on the African continent, among the public, are understanding and owning the agenda of human rights on the continent. And you can see increasing level of consciousness and awareness about rights, and people are willing and indeed exercising their rights, including in the face of repression, as have been reported in the course of this session of the Commission as well. That is extremely encouraging. We, in particular, in this respect, commend the tremendous work that is being done by national commissions of human rights, examples of which I have given in terms of the role that they're playing in monitoring. In some cases, the role that national judiciaries played in order to ensure that some of the issues of human rights do not lead to degeneration of a human rights crisis, whether this be in South Africa or Kenya or other countries. The role that the National Judiciary of Malawi played in ensuring that the election is held in a credible way, in respect of which, of course, the Commission, before the election, has issued a statement, has engaged the authorities, which during the course of this session was welcomed by the authorities in Malawi as well. These are the youth are increasingly aware of their rights and demanding respect for their rights, and to be an agent in defending and exercising their rights and the rights of others as well. These are areas of tremendous progress for us, which need to be really consolidated and institutionalized. The role of civil society organizations, extremely crucial. And indeed, the indispensability of their role have become much more clearer in the course of this pandemic, as they try to render services that couldn't otherwise have been obtained by various sections of society, as we received, for example, even in terms of responding to COVID-19, particularly for the most vulnerable sections of society. We are encouraged by the role that the media and journalists are playing, and we commend them tremendously. I would like to acknowledge at this point in time, of course, the health workers on the African continent who have put their lives and their health on the line in order to protect all of us, and often under extremely difficult conditions, where without access to personal protective equipments and hygienic conditions in the places that they work on, leading to, of course, the unfortunate situation in Africa, where we have much more health workers being falling sick as a result of these conditions to COVID-19. So these are, I think, the observations I have as far as these three questions are concerned.
Honorable, we want to thank everyone who is following this press briefing. And if you have other questions addressed to the Honorable Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, please, you have the email addresses. You can channel them to us, and then we will make sure that they get back and with the responses to you. I also want to thank the interpreters who have done a lot of very good job to make sure that this communication really goes on very interactively without any problem. I also want to thank my colleague, Mr. Mulale Tedese, who is the Media Center Coordinator, for having assisting very critically in organizing this press conference. Honorable, unless you have if you want to conclude and say something to the journalists, please, you have the floor.
Perhaps if Etwell from the Secretariat in Banjul, he indicates that there are questions on the chat. Perhaps if we could listen to those questions and respond to them, if that's possible, I appreciate that.
There are questions on the chat. Yes, I can see two here. Okay. Participants, certified. Assurez-vous que le nom complet apparaît sur client Zoom. I cannot see it on my screen, unfortunately.
Etwell, can you help?
Yes, Commissioner Besso. We have two questions. We have one in French and one in English. Oh, sorry, they're all in English. The first question is from Lucy Ekadu, President of Uganda Journalists Union. And she asks, what is the Commission doing about countries which are non-compliant in regard to reporting the COVID-19 situation in their countries? I'll read it again. What is the Commission doing about countries which are non-compliant in regard to reporting the COVID-19 situation in their countries? That's the first one. I'll go to the second one. This one is a little bit long. It's from Angela Quintal from the Committee to Protect Journalists. And the question is, following up on the first question given about jailed journalists through the continent, Recently, a journalist contracted COVID-19 in pre-trial detention in Egypt and died. The WHO has indicated that prisoners are particularly vulnerable when it comes to COVID-19. Many journalists are being held in pre-trial detention for lengthy periods in overcrowded conditions for long periods. For example, Wawa Jackson, Nafor in Cameroon, who has been in pre-detention for more than 2 years. For journalists and political detainees jailed in countries affected by the virus, freedom is now a matter of life and death. What does ACHPR plan to do in this respect to ensure that member states will do the right thing and free them? Thank you very much. That's the last question.
Thank you, Abel.
Thank you, Etwell. I would also wish to thank Esther. Thanks for the questions. This question relates to what does the Commission do in respect of countries not reporting as far as COVID-19 is concerned? Well, I think from the perspective of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, when the pandemic started early in February, before it spread across the continent, the African Commission is the first body to issue a statement and to communicate with states parties to the African Charter, urging them that under the African Charter they have obligations in order to take measures to contain the spread of the virus and to protect the public from the threat that the virus poses to health and life. And in that context, of course, the various asks that the Commission made include the need and importance of preventive measures, given the weak state of the health systems on the continent. This relates, among other things, to freedom of expression and access to information under Article 9 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. And this requires, of course, that the public is provided regular information on the state of the spread of the pandemic, and also information, public health information on the precautionary measures that need to be taken based on the available scientific data, of course. The Commission, in respect of various countries, either countries in the context of the COVID-19, in the context of election or otherwise, have engaged specific countries in respect of whom the Commission either have, for example, sent a letter of urgent appeal to countries in respect of which we have seen inadequate provision of information in this respect. We have also seen adopted a statement, which you can find, for example, on the website of the Commission, either in respect of Burundi or Tanzania. So these are the engagements that the Commission is having. The Commission, in its statement, again, on a human rights-based response for the pandemic, which the Commission considers to be a foundation for success in containing the pandemic. It had highlighted in its statement of 24 March 2019, which have been circulated and brought to the attention of the attention of states parties to the African Charter and the African Union system, to help address some of these issues. These have been the actions taken. Obviously, if on the basis of these, there are going to be complaints to be received by the Commission using its applicable procedures would address those complaints as well, as I indicated earlier on. Now, as far as journalists are concerned, particularly those who are in situations of detention is concerned, when journalists, of course, on account of the critical importance of their work, are in the custody of the state, the responsibility of the state gets heightened, because when you have somebody in your custody, then the life, security, health of that person basically is in your hands. And therefore you become responsible entirely for the health, security, and life of that person, which means that you have an obligation to make sure that the conditions of custody do not lead to undermining the health, security, and well-being of the person in the custody of the state. Where this is not done, obviously, questions of responsibility arise, questions of violations of rights arise. This relates to, in the context of COVID, to make sure that states, when first, I think, as a matter of COVID-19 response measure, the view that have emerged in the context of this session was that states should use detention as a last resort measure, because detention can lead to congestion of space of detention, and in congested spaces, the risk of spread increases, and that becomes counterproductive to the effort to contain the virus. So that is the first consideration. And if at the last resort measure, detention is going to happen, it is imperative that in those spaces of detention, COVID-19 spread containment measures are put in place. People are provided with protection equipment, including masks, sanitizing of public spaces, and so on and so forth. Not doing that, if it results in contracting COVID-19 and death of a person, can indeed give rise to serious question of responsibility on the part of the state. So the Commission, through its statements and guidance that it has given, continues to urge states to avoid detention in enforcing COVID-19 measures, and to use it only as the last resort measure. And indeed, the African Charter is clear in stating that no condition allows arbitrary deprivation of liberty. No condition, all right, allows arbitrary deprivation of liberty. When liberty is deprived, it has to be based on due process of the law. It has to be through a court warrant. In a context like this one, of course, pre-trial detention should be a last resort, not the first resort that applies in normal cases. Thank you very much.
Very much, Honorable Ayele, for that very enlightening presentation and briefing. I believe that all of us have had a lot of information there. And as I said, if there are other questions that come up later on, we are ready to welcome all the questions that you can channel through our email accounts, and we'll make sure you get the answers on time. We really want to also appreciate the work of the technicians who have made this platform very, very effective. And we want to thank everyone who participated in this press conference. And with this, I think we've come to the end of the press briefing. We give you an appointment another time for another new things on the activities of the African Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Esther, to you for moderating this session. I would like to thank my colleague, Lindiwe Kumalo, the Acting Secretary of the Commission. I would also wish to express my appreciation and thanks to the Vice Chairperson of the Commission, Commissioner Remy Lumbu, and to all members of the Commission, as well as to staff of the Secretariat for the great work that have been done during this session, and also to you interpreters for your support and engagement. To you, the public, for continuing interest and engagement with the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Thank you very much.